Welcome to the Atomic Level, the show where we decode the matters of wealth, one insightful conversation at a time, with the rising stars in finance, business, crypto, and tech on Substack, as well as many who are starting to appear in the new Market Stack Index so that you can grow your net worth and protect your net happiness. I'm Chris Snook, and today I feel like I should have met this guy a decade ago, but I haven't. So today I'm going to finally get to know the man, the myth, the legend that is Jimmy Song, a Bitcoin OG, writing Bitcoin Tech Talk, growing in the list. I think last time I checked, you were rising to 24, maybe even higher now. So it's great to meet you, Jimmy, and I'm excited to spend the next hour or so together.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And yeah, it's been, I can't believe it's been that long, but time flies when you're, as you get older anyway. So it feels like, it feels like it was just yesterday that I got into Bitcoin, but here we are, like many years later.
Yeah. So a lot of the audience that we speak to at Wealth Matters is still what we would call on the new side. And that's, I think, the most interesting opportunity about today's talk. Because what I really want to do is just start with your story and kind of your own journey into being orange pilled, as we like to say. You've got your orange shirt on. I threw up the logo in the background. We're going to basically take this thing that everybody either loves to hate or hates to love or somewhere in between. And we're just going to have a common sense story around it and one man's journey into this as it relates to you. So, growing up or starting back before you were into Bitcoin, like talk to us a little bit about what you did and like how you discovered it and where you came from, just so we have a little context into your story.
Yeah, I'm a coder by trade. I've been programming since I was like 9 years old. So that's sort of my background. I was also a math major in college. And I've been studying Austrian economics, I think around since about 2008 or so. I'm also a veteran of many, many different startups. And I started that when I came out of college back in 98, which is a really long time ago, almost 30 years ago.
We actually
And
graduated at the same time. So we're roughly, you were born in 75. I'm taking it.
76, but yeah, very,
Okay.
very
All right.
close.
I'm older then. I'm the,
You're a little older than me.
I'm the grandpa.
Uh,
There we go.
yeah. So I've been doing this stuff for a long time, and I happen to have sort of like the right confluence of skills and interests, so that when I heard about Bitcoin in 2011, I almost immediately got it, right. I understood that this from a monetary perspective, the economic perspective, what it was. I had a very good idea of how it could work from a cryptographic and coding standpoint. And, I got into it, 15 years ago in 2011. And that's obviously done very well for me. But it's been the journey was more through economics than it was through the technical. And that's a common misconception, is that if you really want to understand Bitcoin, you have to know the technical nitty gritty stuff. And that's actually not true. The harder part to get for most people is the economic aspect. And this is why a lot of Austrian economics inclined people and libertarians tend to get into it before, say, a lot of the Silicon Valley bros and so on. And yeah, that's a large
Well, in
part of the
2011,
journey.
yeah, in 2011, you were like me. I mean, the first time that I recall getting some, which I
Mm-hmm.
wish I still had. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you might remember the name of this. There was a platform that was kind of like Quora meets Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
And when you signed up for it, the first thing they did was deposited 30,000 bits into your account, which essentially is 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Most people have heard of Satoshis, but a bit is basically 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And they would give you 30,000 bits. And I had read Creature from Jekyll Island and some of those books like you probably
Mm-hmm.
did, around the year 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. So from a monetary system standpoint, I was like, this is great. But I also was like, there's no way they're going to let this thing happen, right? Like, I just didn't think it was going to work, but I was like in. So I was giving out startup advice and doing those things. And this platform, whatever it was called, was basically almost like an early version of Nostr was Zaps, right? Like you could
Mhm,
give somebody a comment, like, here's how you raise money
mhm,
for your startup or whatever. And if they liked your answer, they would tip you in bits and they were kind of preloaded. So it was similar to like some of those other mechanisms where every day you
mhm.
could show up and get some free Bitcoin. And I wish I still had that laptop, but I remember where I was when I did it because I was in an office in downtown San Diego, and I think I had like 3 Bitcoin on that thing that I had earned just by, giving people posts. Um, and then I kind of walked away from it as far as, like, paying attention to it till about 2013 again. So what was your like, in 2011 when you got in, like, what do you mean you got in? And then when did you get serious about it, or were you serious about it from day one?
I was very curious from day one, and yeah, you have to remember in 2011 there really was nothing on Bitcoin in the mainstream, right? So
No, no, I mean, there
I
was
mean,
nobody
you
knew anything.
really, I mean, the Bitcoin talk forums was where everyone was hanging out. This is before all the altcoins and everything. It was really just Bitcoin, and that was it. I think the first day I learned about it, I did a Google search, and you had maybe like 5 or 6 links. There really wasn't very much, and it was mostly people saying, giving financial advice or something like that,
Right.
saying, you need to, or I'm now using a GPU. I'm hoping that it'll pay for itself by me mining Bitcoin or something like that. Um, but there really wasn't that much. It was really very different back then because you had maybe one mainstream article every other week or something like that, and it was, and mostly sort of like, here's this weird internet curiosity, something like that. Obviously nowadays, like, you have hundreds of stories every day, and you have entire publications that are into it. You have many books and so on. Back then, you really didn't have anything, so you had to kind of infer from the properties of Bitcoin, or have to, you were forced to understand things from first principles, just because there wasn't very much material out there. And
Basically, there was the white paper, right? I mean, that was
yeah.
really your source guide was the white paper. That was all you had.
And Bitcoin talk forum posts.
Yeah.
There were
Yeah.
some people that were trying to describe it from some other perspectives and so on. And it was a very strange time because you really had to. It was like the Wild West out there, right? Like, just people were scamming each other, doing other things, and it brought in sort of like a cast of characters um, that you would expect. It was a lot of people that didn't really understand it, but had aped into it, thought they were geniuses. You still kind of have that today, right? Where people that got in early think they're brilliant because they got in early, but really they just kind of lucked into it or whatever. You were mentioning like those platforms where they were giving out some free Bitcoin and stuff. I still remember at first day, I was looking for it. One of the links I found was this um, random web wallet or something like that. And if you signed up for it, you got zero point zero 0.05 Bitcoin, which, is currently a significant amount of money. That's like $4,000 or something. But back then it was like, 5 cents
Fractions
or
of a
something like
penny.
that.
Yes, it was like fractions of a penny, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a ridiculously low amount of money, and they were giving it away. Now, like, I think the wallet collapsed or something and took the Bitcoins I had with it, but that was, like, one of the early things, and, even earlier, they had, like, Bitcoin faucets and stuff, and they were giving out 5 Bitcoin at a time, which was, you know, like 5 cents or something, um, when it started. So it was a very different time, and I think, learning about it, I think in that first principles way, and connecting it to Austrian economics, the monetary supply, and things like that was I was very fortunate to have understood a lot of that and also be technical. So I count myself very fortunate because I happened to encounter it when I understood both the technical and economic aspects, and most people, like you said, you're more from sort of the economics background than you understand the monetary aspect, but you didn't really understand the technical aspect, at least at first. And a
No,
lot
not
of
at
people are,
first. Yeah, not
Yeah.
at first, and it wasn't until maybe 2013
Mhm.
where I understood more of the technical, but then I didn't have the math background. Like you said, you had
Yeah.
the math background. So my journey was a little different. I think everybody's journey is a little different, but, I remember Why Bitcoin, the letter Y. Do you remember that magazine when it came out? I forget if it
Yeah, yeah.
I know the first issue I got was July of 2013 because I still have it. I was like, "Well, if nothing else, this magazine might be worth something new."
Yeah, those are being given out for free, I remember, and
Yeah.
that was in 2013 after obviously, like, a few bubbles and stuff like that. But, you know, that this is the normal journey for a lot of people, is that if they're technical, they usually don't necessarily know the economic aspect, and if they're economical, then they don't necessarily understand the technical aspect, and even if you have both, oftentimes the math trips you up, or you don't really understand what's actually going on underneath from a cryptographic standpoint. A lot of coders don't understand cryptography, and it's really only with the advent of Bitcoin that a lot of people really get to understand it. Um, I was fortunate because I understood a lot of that stuff, and you know I
How are you
didn't.
paying the bills at this time, right? Because you weren't paying
Mhm.
them in Bitcoin back then. So, like, what were you doing for work? You know, if
Yeah,
this was your
I
kinda
had a normal normie job, right, as a coder.
okay.
I think at the time that I discovered it, or I was first exposed to it, I was working at a startup, and you know, I still remember going home that night, that first night when I saw it, and you know, did some research and stuff. I told my wife about it. I told her like, "Hey, there's this new thing called Bitcoin, you know, and I read about it, and it's got all these properties, and it's kind of cool." And you know, she reacted like most people. She was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a scam." Right. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I mean, I still kind of like looked into it for like the next week, and look for a way to buy it with a credit card or something like that, and I couldn't find anything. And really, the only way back then that you can go get Bitcoin was at an exchange, and the only real exchange back then was Mount Gox, and
Right.
it was based in Japan. So to get dollars to Japan, you had to use a money transmission service called Dwala. You had to open one of those accounts, and unlike now, back then you had to open the account, and then they will make two small deposits to your bank account, and then you have to confirm that the bank account was linked, and then once that's linked, then you could deposit money to Dwala, and then
That
you
was
have
like a
to.
3-day that was like a 3-day period. That's not
Yeah,
like that
oh,
happened.
3 to 7 days, right?
Yeah.
And then you had to link your Dwala account to your Mt. Gox account, and, you know, that was another, like, 7-day process and stuff. And I actually got that process started in, I think it was, February of 2011, but it was, like, too painful, so I just stopped halfway. I was like, forget it. This is taking too long," or whatever. Of course, obviously, one of the big regrets of my life that I could have bought Bitcoin at, like, a dollar, but
Yeah.
I didn't. Um, but, you know, later that summer, you know, Bitcoin went on a bull run from a dollar to something like $30 and then crashed when Mount Gox had some problems and went down to like $2. And you know, I mean, at that point after that bubble, I was like, all right, I'm gonna finish this process. Luckily I had started a lot of it, and it didn't. It only took like a week to go, you know, link it to a Mount Gox account, and stupidly I held my bitcoins there because I didn't really think about self custody or whatever. And it really wasn't until 2013 with the second bubble, which went from something like $10 to 266. And then, you know, and then Mount Gox had problems again, and it crashed down to like 50. And then later that year, it went up to 1100. But during that summer, I finally got, you know, started self custodying my Bitcoin. And that was also the
Well, and
summer.
again, even
Yeah.
even then, right? I mean, I can't remember now when, like, Trezor or Ledger, but
Oh, they're like 2014, 15.
yeah,
So
I mean, there
it was
wasn't a
pre.
lot of options. Like, I mean, we're literally, the thing that I always tell people that I think the beautiful thing about going on a Bitcoin journey, getting orange pill, isn't whether you when you buy some or not, right? Because at
Mhm.
some point, everybody's going to either own some or they're going to regret that they didn't get it, and they're going to get some. in their retirement account because Fidelity bought it. But
Mhm,
at the end of the day, you're gonna own some regardless, so you just
mhm,
can not worry about that. But the journey, like, for me, I remember very specifically, and I can't remember where I read it, but the first time I really was like, "This is interesting," was reading about the Byzantine generals problem.
yeah,
And,
Byzantine
like,
generals, yeah.
I didn't even know what the hell that was, right? Like, I mean, I it was somewhere between 2011, 2013, but I was, like, fascinated because, again,
Uh-huh,
not coming from a math background, not coming from this, just how in 9 pages, this white paper had solved these things that had eluded people for decades, that had been
mhm,
trying, some of the
mhm,
smartest cryptographers in the world. And there was, like, this historical, attraction to me about it,
mm,
just to
mhm,
try and really understand the thought that went into this
mhm,
and the narrative and everything. What were some of the things that, like, made you go, "Hmm," before you started to buy and you knew you got convicted? Like, when did you
mhm,
go, "Okay, this is thought out"? Like, when did you
mhm.
really have a respect for Satoshi as something different?
Yeah, I think it was really 2013 because I started, so 2011 to 2013, I was just sort of like, holder or whatever.
Mhm.
But 2013, I really started digging into it. And I was, frankly motivated by the monetary aspect of it
Sure.
because I wanted more Bitcoin. And I was, by then I had, gone to another startup and I was working there, and this stuff was super interesting because of, the run up to 266 and then back down, and then, as we were going up towards 1100, yeah, I started looking for opportunities to accumulate more Bitcoin, and this was really like, um, trying to, figure out ways where I can earn some Bitcoin. And I found, that back then, a lot of the dialogue was happening on Reddit at our Bitcoin, and there was a subreddit there, that they had linked to, which was jobs for Bitcoin. Right, this was 2013, and of course everyone else is trying to, earn Bitcoin somehow, and most of the, posts were like, "I will edit your resume," or "I will, do this or that," and very few actual job postings, right? Like, "Hey, I want somebody to do this, and I'm willing to pay," or something like that. But one of the few that was out there was Python programmer wanted, and I'm like, "Oh, I know Python pretty well. Let's figure out what to do." So I messaged the guy and he was like, "Okay, yeah, there's this open source project that I've been working on. It's based on Bitcoin, and I'm willing to pay you in Bitcoin if you do work for it." And I was like, "Sure, all right, done. I want to earn Bitcoin. This is a great way to do it." He gave me some work, and I got it done in a few hours, and I sent it back. I said, "Okay, here's everything." He was like, "Wow, you're really fast. Okay, send me a Bitcoin address." So I sent him a Bitcoin address, and he paid me. And that was, I think, when my mind was kind of blown because the guy was, a programmer in Ukraine, and I'm sitting in Austin, Texas. I had done this work in a few hours, and I got paid almost right away, right? And
Right.
that was just sort of like a mind blowing experience, knowing that he could just like pay. We're halfway across the world and everything else,
Right.
and that was just, mind blowing. So, that month, I ended up working something like 40 hours a week, like, at my normal day job, and 40 hours at home per week just doing this stuff. And I earned a great amount of Bitcoin on that. To this day, probably the best, per hour rate that I've ever gotten, right? Because I was earning Bitcoin. And I learned a lot about, the actual stuff underneath because I had to code it, and I was very motivated because the price constantly going up and everything, and it was a moment where I was just like, okay, yeah, this really could be the future of the entire economy because you can pay people right away. There's like no barriers on it or anything, right? It's just a guy in Ukraine paying me in Austin, and that, for me, that was the moment. Like I knew a lot of it in theory, but it's very different when it hits you like that, and
without a doubt.
somebody just pays you. And
Every time
that would
someone's Yeah, every time someone's told me there's no use for it or they don't get it, I try not to laugh because again, they're not saying it because 'cause they're stupid, they just don't know they've not used it, right?
Mhm,
So, I always chuckle internally because I'll never forget, like, a similar silly situation. I was setting up this was years later, maybe in 21, I can't remember, but I was setting up a Proton Mail account for a business, a startup that
mm,
we had funded and we were doing, and so I was creating everybody's accounts and, I'm going to pay for the seat licenses because it was like $6 a month for the Proton Suite versus Microsoft or all these others that were like double that, right? So I'm like, plus it's secure. So I'm going to pay and, I put the first company card in, and it's Wells Fargo or whatever, and it's like 78 or $80, whatever it is for like 6 seats,
mhm,
10 seats and it won't go through. Like, it's just
mhm,
not going through, and then it's like fraud, and then so then I pull out a different company card, different account, I try to use that one,
mm,
and about 15 minutes later, I'm now on my 4th card, and I'm trying to figure out if I can use my Amex and if I can just reimburse myself, like and then I see a button that says "Pay with Bitcoin," so I just click on that, right, and I
mhm.
send it 88 bucks or whatever the heck it was worth of Bitcoin, and seconds later, it's done, and I was like, right, I'm like, why is this so hard for people to understand? Like, I just spent 15 minutes I'll never get back trying to pay for email. And
Mm,
in a nanosecond, I sent money to Switzerland or wherever the hell Proton Mail is, and they got it,
mhm,
and they're happy with it, and I'm off back to my day, right? Like, simple stuff like that, and your example being another one where you don't have to worry about TransferWise or swaps or, all that stuff.
mhm.
Um, so when did you kinda go full time with what you're doing or an early version of what you're doing now? Because ever since I've been kind of serious about the space, meaning investing time into it, I was curious and serious personally right around 2013 to 15. Like, I was like, "I gotta learn this. This is fascinating." But I didn't get in, like, any material way at that time, until probably early 16, late 16,
Mhm.
somewhere and I'm wondering, like, when did you leave the startup world or whatever you were doing, or did you kinda always have this on the side and it just outgrew everything else?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, it was on the side, but I think that experience in 2013 just kinda showed me, like, I am incredibly motivated by Bitcoin, and I've done a lot of startups where, at least in theory, you're supposed to be very motivated by the equity you have and stuff, and it was just, like, it pales in comparison to the passion I had and sort of, like, the immediate returns of Bitcoin, which I think it is largely missing from the startup world, because and I've written about this, about how a lot of the, equity that you get is, like, all theoretical, and it really doesn't pay off unless, you IPO or something, and I actually had, like, a couple of exits. I was at 2 different startups that IPO'd, and it's like, okay, those are great, but, it just didn't, it still wasn't the level of passion that I had for Bitcoin. So after that experience in late 2013 and going into early 2014, I realized, like, I need to go do something else. Like, I need to be in the Bitcoin space. So starting that summer, I went to a Bitcoin startup, and I did 3 different Bitcoin startups, from 2014 to mid 2017, and I think that was my foray into the corporate Bitcoin world, I guess.
Did you did
But
you find those online, or was this because what a lot of people may or may not know is, like, one of the
mm,
first major conferences was the North American Bitcoin Conference, it was in
mhm,
Texas.
mhm,
A lot of some of the early guys like David Johnston, who's a friend of mine and been on the
mhm,
show, was part of Mastercoins ICO, like early Bitcoiner, and is
mhm.
also in Austin. So Austin kinda had just naturally some really smart guys that got it early like you. Was that part of how you found your way into the first couple Bitcoin startups? Because that wasn't like a thing either. It's not like they were just floating
Yeah.
around every
Yeah, I know. I did go to, that conference, and that was my first Bitcoin conference, was, in the Texas Bitcoin conference in Austin in 2014. And I did start going to the meetups in 2013 and, talk
Mm,
to a bunch of people about it. And it was, let me think. So, how did I get it? Well, I didn't, mostly I met people through the meetup and they were starting something. So they brought me on board and so on. And, and that was how I got into that first one. But that didn't go anywhere, and I ended up going to, um, I ended up going to Armory, which was an early wallet. This is before hardware wallets and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah.
Stock wallet. And I was VP of engineering there. And then when we ran out of money, I went to another startup. It was at the time it was called ItBit, but they changed their name to Paxos while I was there. It's still
Mm.
around, and they're doing a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, and those were the three startups within the Bitcoin ecosystem that I went to. And again, I was very fortunate because I was going to the meetups and I did make contacts with people. And like you said, Austin actually had a bunch of uh, you know, developers and entrepreneurs and people like that. But like every early Bitcoin meetup, they ended up splitting into Bitcoin meetup and crypto meetup. And
Right, right.
I came on the side of the Bitcoin meetup, and thankfully a lot of the scammers went to the crypto meetups, and they're still there to this day. So, yeah, yeah, a lot of fortunate happenstance and a lot of luck, and I have no doubt about that part. But yeah, it was.
I
Um,
think that's an interesting, it's always everybody gets flack for like,
mm,
being speculative or get
mhm,
rich quick. I mean, I think what people don't realize is someone like you, someone who's been around the space for any length of time, like Bitcoin capital is very patient capital. It's very
mm,
convicted patient capital.
mhm,
And until your mind, this is just my opinion.
mhm,
doesn't make it right or wrong. Just until your mind shifts to really understanding and being grounded in its actual inevitability, its actual utility,
mhm,
why it's important, why it's different, you really struggle with that patience because
mhm,
you just think about it in fiat terms. No matter how much you can understand 21 million is 21 million hard cap. Like you still, if you think about it in fiat terms, or if you think about it in any other time horizon other than permanent capital and collateral, it's very hard to kind of ride through with the same enthusiasm. Do you have your own version of that, or you agree or disagree?
yeah. I think one of the things that Bitcoin has really taught me is that you need to think on a long time horizon, because if you're thinking in short term stuff, I mean, there's so many times that a lot of people thought Bitcoin was dead, right? Like it goes down from 266 to 50 in the summer of 2013, and people think it's dead. They're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to pay attention to this anymore. And then it goes up later that year to from 100 to 1100, and people think, "Oh wow, it's back," and then it goes down back to 200. And we had a long bear market there, right? Like from
Mhm.
2013 to 2017, it was a pretty long time, and it looked like Bitcoin was dead for all practical purposes, and so on, when it had crashed down to below 200 and so on. But this is what Bitcoin has taught me, is that you really need to have that low time preference, long time horizon kind of vision, or you're going to get wrecked. And there are a bunch of people. I still remember meeting people in the 2013 era at the Bitcoin meetups and stuff. A lot of them like ended up nowhere, right? Like they had Bitcoin really early, right? Their dollar cost average to Bitcoin was like $5. But they ended up selling, or they ended up divesting into altcoins that went nowhere. And like the altcoins back then, like no one has heard of, right? Like they
Right.
I mean, you mentioned Mastercoin. Like that was one of like the earlier ones that didn't go anywhere. I mean, I guess the Omni network is still around, but like from an investment standpoint, it did nothing. It was such a such a terrible investment. And a lot of people fell into that because, again, they thought they were geniuses for getting in to Bitcoin at $5 cost average. And then they thought, okay, well, I'm going to, now diversify into altcoins. And they got completely wrecked. And the little Bitcoin that they had, maybe they leveraged later, or they lost or something, and they're completely out of it, right? Like by 2017, when the next bull market comes. And this is a common story. Is a lot of people that did get into it went out of it because they didn't really understand it. And that's the big thing. You need to kind of develop that conviction about what it actually is. And it's not as easy as you would think. A lot of people think, okay, well, you got into Bitcoin early, you were just lucky. I mean, like I said, I was very lucky, but to hold on to it
Yeah,
was
that's the hard part.
really difficult.
Yeah, I think that is actually the hardest part, and I say that because I've got, um, 15 reasons that I can tell you why my conviction's only gotten stronger. There's never been a moment where I questioned it, and yet I've made the same mistake because it's so silly, like, when something hits you and you're like, "How did I not think of that before? How did I miss that metric?" And I'll never forget Jack Mallers was doing a speech, like, it was only a couple years ago,
Mm,
and he said something about a 66% ARR. I think he was talking about Strike. He was like, "We reinvest based on, is that feature or is that thing that we're gonna build going to be better than a 66% ARR on our cost
mhm,
of capital? Because
mhm,
if it's not, we're just gonna hold the Bitcoin we have." And
mhm,
I remember it hit me like a 2 by 4
mhm,
because the Bitcoin that I've traded along the way on this rise up that I will never get back that way, like, in other words, where it went is gone, I'm not gonna get it, was in startups that I was convinced, like, "Oh, if I loan, Bitcoin and I have a note against it, this startup's, gonna work, it's funded, we're gonna get there. I'll be in a senior position, I'll get my Bitcoin back." I even priced
mhm,
the interest in Bitcoin terms, right?
mhm,
But yeah, that's true until someone in that startup does something stupid or fraudulent, you have to shut the whole thing down, and now you're just in a line behind every other shareholder and be ever and you go, "Why did I let myself think that I should use my collateral over here to fund this risky thing over here? What are you doing? You've been doing stars for 25 years, Chris. What the hell's wrong with you?"
mhm.
I'll never forget one more story you'll laugh at because in 2017, I'm in Aspen. I don't know if you were at that conference. You might have been. We might not have met each other.
I wasn't.
Okay, so I'm at Aspen at this conference at the institute, and like Roger Vere's there, and G.
Mhm,
Edward Griffin's there, and Perry and Boring had just started the nonprofit in DC, and I mean it was like all these people, right? Ron Paul came. I actually got to meet Ron Paul, and it was like a
mhm,
hero moment for me. And 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 after that, Roger had Bitcoin.com at the time, which was writing the publication. He was like the
mhm,
biggest, fastest growing, newsletter thing. I think it was right before they had their whole, religion war around,
mhm,
Bitcoin Cash. And I think Bitcoin is somewhere around $1,900. It was
mhm,
somewhere in there, right? US.
mhm,
And I was writing for Inc. magazine prior to that, and I had decided to stop because there was no real ROI in it. I was just doing it during a startup time. And they said, "Well, you wanna write for us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be great to be a journalist for Bitcoin.com, like, on the side." And I'm
mhm,
like, "I wanna do it." And they were paying $5,500 a month, but in
mhm,
Bitcoin. So,
mhm,
basically, every month I wrote for them, I would have made roughly 3 Bitcoin when I started, right?
mhm,
So I'm like, "Oh, man, it's not enough to live on,
mhm,
but I can write part-time, I can write fast, I'm a good writer." Um,
mhm,
so I said, "Yes," right? So I'm like,
mhm,
"I'll figure it out." I'm working
mhm,
full-time doing this other thing. And day 3, I had to quit because the volume of stories, like, their expectation of how fast I was gonna crank out stuff was, like, 3 stories a day, and I'm more of,
mhm,
like, a research and do, at that time, like, 1 really deep dive a week,
mhm.
and I'm doing this part-time, so I was like, "Oh, man, I'm not gonna be able to do this," and one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't figure out how to, 'cause can you imagine even 6 of that?
Mhm,
Just get paid in Bitcoin at $5,500 conversion when it went through that lumpy time
mhm,
where it was like
mhm,
up, down, whatever. Oh my god. I've left so much on the table. But again, it happens. So to hold on to it
mhm.
is more than luck. To hold on to it is like willpower like nobody's ever seen, and
Well,
discipline.
not just that, but I would count that a blessing, honestly, because if you did write for Bitcoin.com, where would you have come out on the block size war, right? Like what would have happened when Bitcoin Cash split and you had this um period in later 2017. So, I mean, say 1900. I'm guessing that's around April of 2017.
Yeah, it was right
Yeah.
around April, yep,
Well, so say you had that job for 6 months from April to October of 2017. You had a bunch of stuff that went on, right?
yeah,
Especially that summer where you had the Bitcoin Cash split, and a bunch of people went over to Bitcoin Cash, converted all of their Bitcoins to Bitcoin Cash.
yeah.
And at the time of the split, I think the futures market, Bitcoin Cash was trading around
It
500,
went Yeah, and then
right?
it went up to, like, 26, so that's why
Yeah,
everybody left, because 'cause they're
but
like, "Oh my god,
what's
it's like
Bitcoin Cash
2,600."
at right now? I mean, I
2
haven't checked
something, I haven't checked in 3 years, but it's probably 200 something.
I let me just check to make sure, but that,
It does
currently
what we
Bitcoin
can tell you
Cash.
is it's not at 77,000.
What yeah. So, the current price of Bitcoin Cash is $454, so it's gone down by $50 since that 2017 thing. So,
Yeah.
had you written for Bitcoin.com and worked for Roger Ver, you might have converted all your Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash and then not gotten any of the upside over the next 10 years, right? Almost. And
Yeah.
you would be in like you would have kind
I
of
I
stood.
say it more as a story, so, like, I'm not a guy that
Mhm,
tries to really wallow in the past. I've always just
mhm,
been a forward guy. I've made some choices that I would make differently moving forward,
mhm,
and it was never around conviction. I stayed completely out of the ICO stuff, a lot of like you,
mhm,
just because my gut level has always just been, "Look, man, like, if it makes sense, I'm not trying to limit a nice fast run, but if it is like, if it's a money grab, it's probably not sustainable." And I've just never been a trader's mindset. Like, there are people
mhm,
who are really good at it. They're on the stream. I see some. That's never been me. I've just always been a builder and a long-term value capture, guy. So part of it was, yeah, I knew I couldn't do the job and I wasn't going to take the check, even if it was in Bitcoin, if I couldn't do it at the speed they wanted. And I wasn't interested in operating at that speed. I mean, they put me in their Slack channel or whatever the hell they were using. And I was like, this is like watching, ADHD, smoke crack. Like, this is crazy. I
mhm,
can't keep up with this. So, I don't regret it, but it's funny because when we look at these points and just go, man, I was there. Right. And I knew what I knew. Okay, well, that's all right. Now I know now, right? And I think that's the point is everybody's like, "Oh, am I early?" Well, you're
mhm,
not early if you look in your
mhm,
terms.
mhm,
Like if you wanna be 2013 early, no, you're not early. But if you look out like 20 years, we just had Michael Howell on this morning with a master class on capital flows and M2, and he's got a 20-year horizon on M2 where it is. And it's like, well, look out 20 years at a 30% compounding rate, which is half of what it's been historically. That's 30 million a coin.
mhm,
So are you early? Yeah, you're early. Like, you can get in.
mhm. The thing is, like with any asset that you're thinking about investing in, you have to think in terms of what is the end game? And if you're going to invest, generally you have to figure out, is there something that I understand that the market doesn't yet? You have to have some edge somewhere, right? And this is the whole game of investing. Now, if you believe, as I do, that Bitcoin is destined to become the world reserve currency and replace the dollar, well, then what's the market of all money? I mean, it's
Right.
it's currently many, many, many trillions of dollars. I mean, like probably on,
Nine
on
I
the
think
order
I
of
think
100
depending
trillion,
on
200 trillion, something like that,
well,
or
it's like,
something like
yeah, liquid is somewhere in the 300-400 trillion dollar range
yeah,
according to
yeah.
Sailor Stuff and some of the others, and I think if you add it all capital, it's like 900 trillion.
Yeah, yeah, it's an
And that's
enormous amount of
before
money.
AI. That's before AI starts buying at an order of magnitude to what we could ever consume, right? So, yeah.
But currently the Bitcoin market cap is maybe a little over a trillion or something like that. And so
Yeah.
if you're thinking in those terms, then yeah, if that's the end game, then yeah, of course you're still early. But you have to develop that conviction that this is going to be the case. And if you do understand that that's the case, then of course you'd be aping into Bitcoin. But unfortunately, what people want is something that has zero risk, that requires no conviction, and but still causes their money to go up. And this is the they want to eat fudge and lose 30 pounds, right? Like they want impossible things, and this is why you're sitting on the sidelines and not making any money, because you're expecting everything to be handed to you on a platter. That's just not how life works. So
Right.
if you have that conviction, or if you're willing to go study, you can get there. Usually takes people, many years to get there. And I can say for myself that even though I first encountered it in 2011, I didn't really go all in until 2015, 2016. It took me 5 years, and it really wasn't until I read Safeteen's book, The Bitcoin Standard, and that
Yeah.
didn't come out until 2017. But I happened to
Right.
be friends with him, so I saw the manuscript beforehand, like a year before, and that was what really kind of ultimately convinced me on the economic front, and that's where I developed that conviction. Most people don't get there for a few years, even after first learning about it, even after buying a little bit. It takes a level of understanding and conviction against sort of the conventional wisdom. But that's where you make all your money, is where you're right and the rest of society is wrong. And that's it's
I
kind of
think,
smart.
and again, yeah, your conviction has to be grounded in something other than number go up. I
Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
agree with that. And I mean, for you, what my conviction was based on, there was a transaction I did in 2019 for events. We were doing hackathons in the space. We
Hmm.
we worked a lot with Wyoming, and I know you're familiar with a lot of that stuff around that
Hmm.
time too. So I'm so surprised we never collided before. But when Caitlin and everybody, Albert Faulkner and all the guys were passing laws in
Hmm.
2018 through 2020 in Wyoming, kind of giving some jurisdictional certainty around this space we call crypto now, and
Hmm.
Bitcoin specifically. Um, I was organizing a Sandcastle Startups Challenge, and we were working on, Web3 startups, and then we were also doing a hackathon with Wyo Hackathon.
Hmm.
And I had a sponsor, and the sponsor was a mining operation, and they basically were like, "We'll do 50 grand and we'll do the spider." I said, "Great." And I was like, "I'll take Bitcoin, or you can pay me in cash." And they're like, "We'll just send you Bitcoin." And like minutes later, there's $50,000 worth of Bitcoin, right? In the
Uh-huh.
operating account. And I remember thinking the permissionless side hit me then,
Mm.
right? Like that's when it hit me. I'd read about it, I'd heard about it, but that was like the first time someone did a sizable transaction,
Mm.
right, in Bitcoin. And I remember thinking, and at the time, I think Bitcoin was somewhere right around 10.
Hmm.
It had pulled back from the 2017 high. It pulled back down in the, 10, 11 range, and it was kind of hovering there for a while.
Mm.
And so it was like 5 Bitcoin. And I remember being like, permissionless.
Mm.
This is what the world needs.
Mm.
Permissionless money. Two people doing a deal. Nobody can stop them. And minutes later, they're both settled. And I
Yeah.
remember just thinking that works.
Yeah.
And forget all the people that could use that for the nefarious reasons. That's obvious. But just like mobile phones have been used to do bad things, the connectivity they've provided for 4 billion people that never had access to information before is unprecedented. And so, I just looked at it at that point like, okay, this is about a permissionless life being even on the table, because every other asset you have or own could be, sanctioned or shut off.
Hmm.
Like, it's not actually your asset. In gold, you can't lug a lot of that around without breaking your back.
Yeah.
So, I remember that's when I got, like, a different level of conviction, was off of that permissionless concept being, like, experienced. I remember just experience it and being like, "Oh, wow. Okay, now I get it."
Mm.
What grounds you in it today? Where do you kind of, and what are you focused on today? Like, what are the strategies you're writing about? Your Substack's growing, which is well
Hmm.
deserved. Guys, subscribe to him. If you're listening to this on the replay, check out Jimmy's song on Substack. Subscribe to him. He's got a ton of really educational material on there and some great he's called Bitcoin Tech Talk, if I remind. So if you
Hmm.
want to get into the weeds on that side too, but what are you passionate about today? Like, what are you trying to do out there today for folks?
Well, the main thing that I'm working on right now is production ready, and it's an alternate client for Bitcoin's node software, and it's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but but the node software has been largely dominated by Bitcoin Core for the past 17 years. And there are certain structural things that I don't think are optimal when you only have one client software. And we were seeking to make a third implementation. The only other one that has real adoption is something called Bitcoin Knots.
Yeah,
Um,
I wanna actually go into the weeds a little bit with you on here
mhm,
because even if people aren't familiar with it, again,
mhm,
the more grounded you are in the level of infrastructure and development and thought leadership happening in this space, I think the more you'll realize how not only can it not be killed, but how well governed it is in the sense of a true meritocracy, true like, it is the example that we don't have anywhere else. It's like
mhm,
you can have fights, but they're happening in public. Block wars was the first major one, right?
mhm,
We talked about that earlier, but now we're really at this inflection point between what Jameson Lopp and some of the other guys just put out with was it 361, I think, and quantum and all these things. And so, what do you worry about? Not because there's people that are worried about hard forks and soft forks and what that means,
mhm,
and yet at the same time, you're also saying, you know what, there is a node software issue, and
mhm,
I think you can find a better way to fix it. And you come from a credible space. You certainly aren't trying to attack the network. I'm saying that as a guy,
mhm,
who knows you very little, but who's watched you for a
mhm.
decade plus. What help us understand the dynamic at work right now and what some of the religion or the politics of Bitcoin have that are concerning you.
Yeah, I think it all came to a head about a year ago, and there was a controversial change around op return and how much data could go in there. Now, I don't think the issue itself was that important. Personally, from a technical perspective, there are still other ways to limit spam and things like that. But the part that worried me was that the developers of the Bitcoin Core client decided amongst themselves that this was a good change despite community blowback. There were a lot of people in the community saying this is not a good idea and we don't want this change to go in. Now it's about defaults and things like that. You don't need to worry about the specifics per se, at least for my argument. But that was worrisome to me because it is a consensus system. And in a consensus system, it's the users that are creating that consensus and not just the developers. But that was the argument that they made, and um, they merged the change in, and they put out a little blog post on bitcoincore.org saying, we are doing this because we as developers feel that this is the best thing. And you, as the user, don't need to run our software if you don't agree with it. Uh, and that was a little bit of a disingenuous argument because, in a sense, they were at the time really the only ones that had it. And it like go run something else. Well, what am I supposed to run? And what was even worse was that people did start switching to knots, which at the beginning of this had maybe 3% of the network in terms of the pure number of nodes. It grew to something like 20%. This was sort of like the protest, right? It was, okay, you're telling me to go run something else. Here I am running something else. But then you saw the same people saying, oh, what you're running is completely insecure and it's run by only one developer and that person is crazy and all this other stuff, which is like, then I mean, like, what are you supposed to feel as a user, right? They're telling you go somewhere else, and you go somewhere else, and they're like, oh, not like that, and you feel kind of like you're being held hostage, right? So that whole dynamic, I think, was troublesome to me because, in a sense, they're setting some sort of a precedent for we decide as developers what is good for the network, and you user don't have much say if we agree amongst ourselves.
So I want to pause you there, but I don't want you to
Mhm,
stop. I just want to
mhm.
make sure that I can calm it down for folks and contextualize it so that they can speed up. Feel free to add to this before you keep going, but I want to pause it there. Just hold that thought. So essentially, for those who don't know what a node is or why a node software matters, right? If you think about the current monetary system, you know what the Federal Reserve is. You may not know exactly how it functions, but essentially it is a central bank. And by the very nature of central bank, it has the monopoly on legal tender for
Mm,
its clients, in this case, the US government. So it has the monopoly on printing dollars that are acceptable as legal tender in the global monetary system and inside of the US. And so it is one node. There's like actually whatever the 12 banks, right? But there's
mm,
central bank is basically a single node, a single point of failure, a single point of control, and it's appointed by the administration, but it's not voted on by us. We have no say as citizens, i.e., people that have to use the money, in how much money they print or what the balance sheet looks like or what they do over at the Fed, right? So
mhm,
that's the system that exists over there. What I heard you saying is, Bitcoin, one of the promises of it was everyone permissionless could not only buy and trade and sell it peer to peer, but they also could run their own copy of the ledger. And
mhm,
so in order to do that, you download a node um, on your computer, and you that's software. So what Jimmy's talking about, for those who are not familiar with that, is there's a piece of software you can put, and it'll basically go back to January 3rd, 2009, the very first Genesis block, and you will have every transaction that ever happened on the Bitcoin network in the history of the last 17 years on your computer. Just like the Library of Congress has copies of the book, and then all these libraries around the world have other copies of this book. So if you burn it at Washington, D.C., there's still a copy of it somewhere in Alexandria or somewhere in Greece or somewhere, right? And so the decentralized nature of Bitcoin happens because even if I'm not mining it, I could just run a node on my laptop and I have a copy of it. So it's a very important piece to the governance. And what you're saying is the core developers, who basically are volunteers and who have been since day one, who maintain the network and this code base, either through fatigue or through whatever, got to a place where they're like, you know what, we think this is best and we're going to make this change despite the user base, which is now obviously much larger, saying, I don't think we want spam. And essentially op return was the second piece of Taproot. You can unpack the technicals. I'm going to like plain speak it, but that unlocked the ability to do NFTs, or what we call ordinals, inscriptions on a Satoshi, on a Bitcoin. And so this notion of spam was, it was a currency application. Bitcoin, the currency, was lining on top of this settlement layer called Bitcoin, the network. And now we're allowing you to do other things on it, which means spam, right? And so if we flood the network, then we could raise transaction fees. We could have, like we could have block size issues again. We could have all these different things that people don't want. That was the argument against. In plain speak, the argument for was, it's going to happen anyway. It would be better to have it happen on Bitcoin network. It's now 16 years in. It's the most secure accepted settlement layer. Why not? And again, pick a side, doesn't matter. But the point is, the core developers kind of made a move that changed the way they had operated in the past. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, a little bit. A couple
Clarify
of
it, because I
corrections
don't want
there.
to. I
Most
don't want to misspeak anything. I just want to pay that up there so that we can give people context if they don't know what the hell we're talking about up until now.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
want to kind of like,
It used to be all volunteer labor, at least at the beginning. I think over the last 10 years, what's happened is that most developers are now paid through grants and so on. So
mhm.
the people working on core, vast majority of them are getting funded by organizations like Brink, Chaincode, Spiral, localhost, and things like that. And some of them sponsored directly by companies like BitMEX and Gemini and places like that. So it's a little bit different than your typical open source project. Most open source projects are led by like volunteers, and in a very strict sense, I suppose they are volunteers. They're just getting paid by other
Well, and,
sources.
and I mean, it can work, right? Linux has
Mhm,
been around for 30 years, and
mhm,
Linux Foundation, right? I mean,
mhm,
these people are volunteers in essence, but they're not. They're getting paid, and rightfully
mhm.
so, because the workload is bigger, the distribution's bigger. So
Right.
it's that balance of what
Mm.
becomes corruptible versus not.
Yeah, yeah, and
And
that's the thing is that because they've had sort of like the leading position for so long, and the vast majority of nodes run them. What's happened is essentially that they are not really incentivized to listen to user feedback. Now, that's not to say that they don't. They obviously do listen to user feedback as much as they can, but there's no real great mechanism for users to give that feedback. And we kind of saw it with this op return thing, where a lot of users did provide feedback, but it wasn't really listened to. It was just sort of, hey, we're agreeing amongst ourselves, and this is where I think knots became much more prominent, and we're kind of getting into a toxic dynamic where people are just sort of attacking each other, and this happens when you have sort of like a bipolar type power dynamic, which is what we have in politics in the U.S. You're more against the other side than you are for your current side, and
Right.
that's a situation we find ourselves in. Which is why I'm working on Production Ready. It's a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, and we're looking to make a new implementation that's neither knots nor core. And once you bring a third implementation into the mix, and hopefully subsequent implementations after that, you're less arguing against the other side and more for your side. So instead of saying, I'm against core because they're doing this, or I'm against knots because they're doing this, you have to say, I am for core because of this, or I am for knots because of this. And that's what we're hoping to bring. And, we're trying to lead the way by making that part clear. And saying we are for sound money. We don't think any of these other use cases amount to anything else. A lot of people want to have zero knowledge covenant proof this that or whatever. I think the sound money aspect of Bitcoin is the application. It's the only thing that really matters within Bitcoin, and everything else is a rounding error. If you try to add new functionality or whatever. And that's the argument that I've been giving, and
Which is
that
kind of ironic, and
uh-huh,
maybe this is not ironic, it feels ironic to me, so that's why I'm interested in your take on it. It's kind of ironic because you would have thought, and I kinda thought up until op return,
mhm,
um, that core was very laser focused on that very thing. That's where the maxis were, that's where that, and again, not saying one side's better than the other. I think there's arguments to be made for both. What you're saying is, look, if you can be one thing, be the
mhm,
thing that has the most impact, the most value, and the most ROI. And right now, that's sound money because we don't have sound money anywhere
mhm.
that is globally permissionless and acceptable. We have gold, we have silver, but
They're
we've had
physical.
those
They're
for
not
5,000
digital. Yeah.
years, and we still have the issues we have because we haven't solved the utility of fiat and being able to move money around the world as a medium of exchange at scale. And we're moving into a world where everyone's, not even going to be the majority consumption. We're now going to have, agents buying more than humans ever do in microtransactions. So if we can be sound money, then that's probably enough, right? And everyone ever since Bitcoin became a thing, and not taking a position as this is negative, has tried to make it something else, right? Because Ethereum came up because there was other things you could do with cryptographic networks, and it was like, well, let's go solve those. And then Solana comes out, and so do you believe that there is a role for those other networks or those other L1s to kind of play, and you're just not interested in it, which is fair and fine? Or do you think that it all should happen on Bitcoin?
Well, I don't think there are really any proven use cases for any of that stuff. The only thing that Ethereum has been successful at is being a platform for launching new tokens. Same with Solana, right? Except it's meme coins and stuff with not even purported utility. So I don't think they've solved anything. And really, the big question you should ask whenever they're like, "Oh, we're going to do this, this, and this," is why do you need a new token, right? Because every single time that's been their sort of fundraising strategy is sell tokens into the public, and it turns out that that's the most profitable part, so they don't deliver on anything else. And whenever they do deliver on something else, no one's really interested. Have you noticed, right? Like you'll have like a token like Gnosis or something. Oh, we're gonna have decentralized betting or whatever. No one actually bets on anything, right? Oh, we're going to have a token for dentists. No dentists actually use it. We're going to have
Right.
a token for, the country of Iceland. Nobody in Iceland knows about it, right? It's completely disingenuous um, excuses for money printing, and that's essentially what all of those are. Is if you're creating a token, like you're basically being your own central bank, which is what every altcoin is. So I don't see any utility whatsoever. Now, is it possible that there's some other functionality that could be useful? I don't. Maybe I haven't seen one, but I suppose in the future there might come something like that. But if it is possible, then I would suspect that it would be built on Bitcoin because you shouldn't need to create a token, right? The
Right.
token
So,
economic
this is
aspect
why I
is
asked you that, and
strictly,
I'm
yeah.
this is why I asked you that question because I wanted you to well, I didn't know how you were gonna answer, but
Hmm.
now that you answered that way, kinda sets up the next question. So, back to the node software issue.
Hmm.
Part of and I'm saying this because 'cause I'm not sure if it's a contradiction. I'm not saying you're contradicting it. I'm saying I think
Hmm.
this is what confuses people when they're trying to pick a side and they only have 2 choices, right? Right now, knots or core, even if they knew that was their 2 choices. Is that what you just said is, look, we have King Kong, right? There's no reason to we have the ultimate settlement layer. We have the ultimate sound money. We have a deflationary supply. We have a 16 plus year track record going on 17, right? Nothing else has that. We have the network effects. We have the institutions. Now we have sovereigns. Um, build it on top of Bitcoin. But everyone's argument is going to be, well, I can't unless you change Bitcoin's code base. And now Core makes a change that would allow you to do things on it you couldn't do before. People worry about the spam issue, but again, we could build spam filters, is the argument, right? So, okay. But how do you reconcile those things? And maybe it's because of what you're building. That's why I'm curious. Like, what does this node software do that solves the best of both worlds, where you keep Bitcoin secure and pure and like what it is, but at the same time, make all this other noise irrelevant because I don't need another token. If I can just find a way to buy and trade and earn Bitcoin, why would I care about anything else unless I wanted to manipulate a money supply that I created out of thin air, which is what your argument is on the alt side, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the it isn't necessarily directly addressing that. I think that's like people will always want to print their own money.
Right.
And countries do it, and now a lot of VCs have done it, and now even individuals are doing it with like meme coins or whatever. The real strength of Bitcoin and the reason why Bitcoin is so successful is because it requires consensus to do a lot of that stuff. And that consensus can't be just the developers. And that's the problem that we're solving is that we want to give users a voice. And if you give users a voice and they have sort of a veto, if you will, over consensus changes, that's the way it should be, and it should be very, very difficult to make changes that users disagree with, because that's the nature of a consensus system. You're supposed It's supposed to be hard to change anything that a significant portion of the community doesn't like. So that's really the reason for production ready is that we're giving the users a way to give market feedback. And the way that they can do that with production ready is that you can choose what software to run and you can make a rational choice instead of, well, I'm forced into this one because it's the only one, or I have one of two choices and really I'm going with one because it's the lesser of two evils. I mean, those are terrible reasons. I think a person should be able to choose based on the values that they have, uh, what they think is good, and so on. And that gives the users a bigger voice in the Bitcoin ecosystem, which is what we're trying to solve for. Now, if you don't have that, and it does become more sort of like whatever the developers want, and they recently have started a policy of no longer supporting versions that are too old and things like that, then you're kind of forcing everyone to run whatever it is that you have. And if they remain the only one, then they effectively have control. You're introducing centralization. So
Mhm.
that's what we're trying to prevent. And as far as like all the altcoins and stuff, I think they've been discredited over and over and over again since the advent of the first ones from 2011, and they got discredited in 2013, they got discredited in 2017, they got discredited in 2021. They're discredited now. It's just people like to gamble, they like printing their own money. I mean, that's just kind of how it is, and it takes people a while to figure that out, and unfortunately, they have to
Well,
learn from it.
and then they have bags that they're holding that they don't wanna have go to 0, right? So,
Yeah, and
there's
it's
a
a
different
terrible
gravity.
incentive. Yeah, and unfortunately, like, VCs are very culpable on a lot of this stuff. If you saw, like, the Zcash pump last year, I mean, this was
Yeah.
them putting out as much FUD as possible on Bitcoin, saying, "Oh, it's quantum vulnerable," and all this other stuff, just as a way so that they could dump their bags on retail, and they largely were successful, which is, even more scary in the sense that they still have that kind of influence after, like, just failing over and over and over and over again. I mean, there's so many altcoins that they made bank on that retail had to be bag holders on, and it's unconscionable. But I mean, because they're rich and they play these Cantalon games and things like that, they're allowed to continue to have a reputation that they frankly don't deserve.
Yeah. I wanna finish with this, Jimmy, and then I want everybody to, give you a follow, subscribe, go down the rabbit hole with him. There's a wealth of knowledge on his Substack. We'll be adding more. When it comes to production ready, so I had this thought. I don't know if somebody asked me what should I do? Should I buy Bitcoin first or should I run a node first?
Hmm.
And I'm thinking about the onboarding, right? Like, and you go, well, you know what? Like, if you ran a node, most people that own Bitcoin, even if they do own it, don't know where or how to run a node, and that they
Hmm.
should. So I would almost make the argument to start with running a node, especially if production ready's out. Like, in other words, and I'm not selling it because of you. I'm just saying I can make an argument that says, you know what? Go run a node and understand what the ledger is, because it's the first time you actually get the gravitas of this is the people's money. In other words, if I run a node and no one can stop me from running a node on whatever crappy laptop I have, then no one can stop me from seeing the ledger. And if no one can stop me from seeing the ledger, this might be the only honest money that ever existed. And if it's the only other honest money that ever existed, maybe I should own a little. And now I can connect my wallet to my own node and I'm truly sovereign. Okay. Now dollar cost average in, right? Now learn about self custody. Is that that's one approach, but is that the approach you recommend? Or would you say buy it and then figure that shit out later? Pardon my French.
Yeah, I would say buy it first. Just gives you it gives you incentive to learn about it. Most people do not learn enough to go. They're not motivated enough to go and learn how to run a node until they have a financial incentive. And I'm a fan of incentives. Now, you might be the rare virtuous person that learns about it all before buying any. And in that case, maybe running a node first is good for you. I just find from practical experience, most people are not like that.
Yeah. Well, and I
That.
think that's right. I mean, I think you're right. You got to have a reason to care, even if
Mhm,
it's a couple bucks, right? You got to have a reason to care. It becomes fun then, and then becoming fun is kind of watching after your little reason
mhm.
to care, right? And I guess my encouragement would be, and we'll put it in the show notes, or if it's on your Substack, make sure everybody knows where to get it, and we'll let you part with that. But where can they find out information on production ready and kind of when they could either download that software and use that to run their nodes? I'd love more people to run nodes. I think that's the next piece. Is first thing is get some, and then once you get some, don't stop there. Like, literally take your power back and start to run a node. It doesn't cost anything to run a node.
Well, it does in the sense that you have to have hardware and bandwidth.
Well, yeah, but you probably already have that, right? I mean, you already have.
Likely.
Yeah,
But yeah, you do need to you want to, verify, not trust, and running a node is how you verify. You can't audit the central bank. you can't audit a lot of these altcoins because the the um, the cost to run a node on one of those is astronomical. I mean, like for an Ethereum node, it's just like you have to spend $20,000 on computer equipment just to run it. Uh, Whereas, a Bitcoin node, you can probably set up for less than a few $100s, just on a Raspberry Pi and a 2 terabyte hard drive with a little bit of RAM. I mean that's honestly one of the priorities that Bitcoin nodes have is making sure that you can run it fairly cheaply, and that's definitely a big feature. Um, but yeah, getting to know that stuff and understanding it gives you sovereignty because you can verify things for yourself, and that's the big thing about running it. You can find out about Production Ready at productionready.org, and yeah, you can obviously also subscribe to my Substack newsletter, jimmysong.substack.com, if you're interested in yeah, keeping up with what's going on in the technical part of Bitcoin and my cultural commentary on whatever interesting Substack articles I also find.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely interested in understanding the weeds that you're looking at because it's something that I'm passionate about. So it's a pleasure to have you on the
Mhm.
Atomic Level. Thanks for saying yes. Thanks for putting your stuff out there on Substack. Again, last call, guys. As you're listening to the replay, just go check them out. Subscribe. Productionready.org is where you go learn about the node software. I'm going to go bookmark that. And Jimmy, I hope to meet you in person one of these days. I can't believe it hasn't happened yet, but it's nice to at least do a virtual one finally.
Well, thanks for having me, and yeah, we'll see each other at some point, I'm sure.
Awesome. Take care.